Hello and welcome to Getting Started with Silhouette Paint with me, Ben Brownlee from Boris Effects. In this video we are going to be looking at the basics for remove and how we can do things like removing logos or removing jewellery using Silhouette Paint. We have our first shot here which we're going to start with. Let's analyse the shot a little bit and see why we'd want to use paint in the first place. So the task at hand is to remove this logo in the middle of the sneaker, and there's a couple of things that we're going to have to pay close attention to here, and they both boil down to changes in lighting. So if we have a look at the start here, we have the shadow of the other leg going over and moving there, and we also have the change in the sunlight that hits the shoe as we move through there. So we're going to be paying close attention to those as we move into paint. So let's do that. I'm just going to duplicate up my logo remove here and get rid of this paint project that we already have on top and start another one. So I'm going to come down into Boris Effects Silhouette, Silhouette Paint, and go into Open to bring us into the Silhouette interface. And then we just have to give a new project name. I'm going to call this one Logo Remove 01 because that's very creative. I'm going to save this into my Silhouette Paint folder. And I'll leave our working depth at 8-bit because we're just working on 8-bit footage. And let's create that project. Okay, and we'll just play this back and set my play mode to bounce. So that's my favorite one to start with. Okay, so let's zoom in and take a better look at this logo that we're going to get rid of. Now, Silhouette Paint has a few different tools to help us remove objects. And the first one at the top, which is our blemish tool, is going to be pretty good just to get rid of like bits there and there. Obviously, let's not worry too much about the noise difference because we haven't changed that, but that's the basic idea. Tap, tap. And we can basically remove that. But when approaching this sort of larger remove, I like to come up to the view modes and just check out things in the color layer and in the detail layer, because often we can get better results by removing things first from the color and then the detail, or the other way around. So let's take a look at that. So if we go into the color, we can see that pretty much everything around here shares a similar color for us. So what I could do is come into my color tool, turn on color only, so I'm only painting in the color, and I'm going to right click to sample the color next to it and just paint over the top there. And if I right click and drag out, I can get an average of the colors around there. So this is very rough, but we've got a palette that looks sort of similar to what we were going for. So let's take this back into output. And from now on, I'm going to be using the shortcut keys, which are the number keys at the top of the keyboard. 1 is our output, 2 is our foreground, 8 is our color, and 9 is our detail layer. 1, 2, 8, 9. So you can see if we move back now, we start to hide the logo a little bit there. So that's us painting in the color layer. And although this might look promising, in about 5 minutes time, you'll see why this might not be the best strategy for this particular shot. But it's a useful technique anyway, so let's carry on with this. So I'm going to go into my clone mode now. And I'm going to look at my detail layer. So the detail shows us the different frequencies that are available within our image. If I come down to my detail in the bottom right hand corner, so I'm only painting in the detail, we can choose whether we're going to paint in the fine, the medium, or the coarse details themselves. And if we want even finer control, we can also use the slider here as well. But for the most part, you're just going to be using coarse, medium, and fine. And I'm going to be sticking with fine. And I'm going to be coming into the clone tool. So now we're in the clone tool, I can use shift click to just quickly clone from one area to another. And you can see if I come back into my output by pressing 1, you can see that I'm taking on the texture of the shoe, but we're keeping the colors that we had previously just on there. So if I just zoom out using F to fit, you can see that we're starting to get something a little bit interesting there. Let's come in. And it's a really useful technique, not just for doing removes, but also for cleaning up skin, as we'll see in a different exercise. And we can just sort of patch that in there. And that's still looking a little bit rough, but we're kind of getting there. Let's just feather out some of those edges. Because what I'm trying to do with this remove is try and keep some of those natural elements in there. So the suede isn't just one big flat colour. We sort of get to keep some of those natural lines in there. And I can just zoom in and out with the plus and minus, and we're kind of getting somewhere. And this may look a little bit blotchy, but I can now use another tool, which is one of my favorites here, which is the drag tool. And what the drag tool does, let's show you what that does on a normal bit. What the drag tool does, it takes the area under the brush when I click, and it lets me drag that over to the side. And we have the controls down here, which change the decay. So if I bring the decay up to 98%, I can drag that a lot further before it starts to decay. If I drag that down to 70, actually I'll drag that down to around about 50, you can see that it decays very, very quickly. And I can change the mix up on that as well. So a lower mix makes that opacity a bit shorter, a bit smaller, and a higher mix mixes that over the top in a more visible way. So let's just reset those by clicking on the reset buttons. And I'm just going to come into color here. And I'm going to turn my opacity down a little bit to about 75, because we want to sort of keep this a bit natural and want to keep some of the original colors that we have in there. And I could just take a look at the color layer there. And I can see that I probably want to just smear some of that down there just to make that a little bit. Come back into the output, make that a little bit less harsh. That's looking a little bit unfinished at the moment, but that's fine because we're going to have to redo some of this anyway. And I'm going to show you the reason why as we auto paint all of our changes across onto other frames. Because the beauty of the Silhouette paint system is that it is this hybrid system where every paint stroke that I make is recorded down in my paint history, we've seen down here, which gives me that speed of regular raster paint as we're just painting pixels on top of this image, but also means we have the repeatability of vector paint. So I can repeat what I've done here across multiple frames. And to do this, I'm going to need to motion track my logo. So moving into the Roto module, I'm going to add a new layer into my object list, and I'm going to call this one Shoe Track, because all of our motion tracking data is going to go onto a layer. And then I can come over to my Roto tools on the left hand side and go click, 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 click to sort of close that shape up. So make a simple shape that describes this area of the shoe. And I'm going to come into my motion trackers. I'm just going to quickly track this in with the Mocha tracker, just turning on perspective and tracking forwards. And this will track forwards and automatically apply that tracking data to my layer. And if I go to stabilize my viewer, I can stabilize my viewer around that shape. And that will let me know whether that is tracked in nicely or not. And that is. And let's pop back into the paint module. So one of the things you have to be aware of when doing removes is the idea of lighting changing over time. If the lighting doesn't change over time, it can actually be a lot quicker just to paint up one single frame and then motion track that back in your host. So just use that as a regular patch. But when things do change over time, when we have lighting changes as we have here, using the right tools at the start is going to make a huge, huge difference. So I'm going to come down into my paint history and just name my groups up. This is always a good idea, so we know what's going on here. I'm going to go logo remove and logo remove 2. I'm going to come over to my transform and set this to my shoe track. So I make sure that my shoe track from the Roto module is connected in here. Have both of my logos selected. Remember to click on match move so that it takes the tracking data from my shoe track. And I'm going to auto paint this forwards. And I'll just let it do its job and we'll be back when this is painted at 100%. And through the miracle of editing, here is the final auto paint. And we can see a few problems with this. And they're actually all related to the same thing. And that's because we weren't taking into account where we were cloning from and what we were doing in relation to the bigger picture. The temptation was to happily paint on one frame and then see what happens. Whereas if we have got quite a lot of movement and we've got lots of lighting changes, this way of working isn't going to give the results that we need. So with that in mind, let's start again and use a different technique. Now, because I don't want to keep any of the work that we've already done, I'm going to come down to the bottom right hand corner and go to Delete All Frames. And this is basically the nuclear option for Silhouette Paint. This will get rid of all of our frames, and as it warns here, the operation is not undoable. Are we absolutely sure? Yes, I am. Right, so we're going to start again from scratch. So the two biggest mistakes we made there was choosing to use the color tool when we knew that the colors were going to be changing over time. So that was mistake number one. So mistake number two was when using the clone tool, was sampling from an area too far away from the logo, and that gave us some inconsistent results. So what's another way of doing this? Well, another way of doing this is to do a lot of the work with our friend, the drag tool. And if I come up to stabilize out our viewer across the shoe track here, I'm going to show you what I mean. Because when we do things with the match move, it's basically going to repeat the brush strokes that we're seeing here. So if we're cloning from this area over here and we move over there, maybe the soft part of the shoe was kind of just bleeding in a little bit and giving us a wrong result. If we're using something like the drag tool to just paint over the top here, then we know that those colors are going to be consistent throughout our shot. And let's zoom in a little bit here, and I'm going to take the opacity down, and I'm only dragging in the direction of the pattern of the shoe. So I'm trying to keep in that natural flow that we have in the suede of that shoe. Because it's using the colors that are already in the image, we're not going to run the same risk of those colors changing as the lighting changes. And I can just try and build in some of those creases as well there. So I'll just use my pen just to move that into a nice shape. So we're not just doing sharp edges or straight edges. We're getting a sort of smoothness going along it. And in the first instance, I'm a lot happier with that. So I've got a few repeating patterns that I'll just get rid of around about there. But the only thing we're really missing now is going to be the grain. And we have our grain tool down at the bottom here to add grain back into our image. And let's turn my opacity back up to 100% so you can see what that grain is doing. Look at that. There we go. So I want to match the grain up a little bit more. And the way to do this is to use our compare tools down at the bottom here. So I can do a horizontal split or a vertical split. Let's hit F to go back to full screen so I can see my little widget over the top there. And maybe bring that around about here and zoom back in. And then we have a before and an after of what's going to happen when we apply that tool. And this reacts to things like the opacity changes as well. And it gives us a good idea of what we're missing. And if I come up to the top right hand corner, I can also break this down into my different color channels. So the red, green, and blue color channels. So this is going to make things a lot easier. So when it comes to grain, I'm just going to try and look for a patch of the natural grain we have here and compare it to somewhere where I'm going to be adding the grain, which is in this blank area over here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just turn the softness up. And we're only working in the red channel for now. And I think actually all I needed to do was turn the softness up to 1 on that, and that's looking pretty good. Come over to the green channel. Let's turn the softness up on that. Yeah, that's looking all right as well. I might take the green amount down 1 just to match that in a bit better. And when it comes to the blue, let's add a bit of softness on that as well. And I might need to just add a little bit more blue in just to match those two up, and I think that's going to look all right. So we'll come back up to the color channels, turn that off, and now if we have a look at the before and after, just sweeping that over the top, that's going to look pretty good, I think. So we'll turn off our split, and I'm just going to paint over the top of the area just patched in with the drag. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to call this one Logo Remove 1. Make sure I've got my match move turned on. Make sure I've got my transform set to that shoe track. Going to be happy with that. Let's turn off the eye on that so we don't have to see the strokes. And I'm just going to auto paint that throughout the rest of the image. And if I turn that to foreground before I do the auto paint, it paints in a little bit faster. So here's the moment of truth. Let's turn this back to output. And we'll play that. And we can see that's already looking a lot better. Even in the stabilized view mode where we can sort of easily see the mistakes, this is looking a lot better. And because we use that drag tool, that is a bit more of a procedural tool rather than the color tool, we're getting in and keeping in all of those changes of lighting. So let's come over here. And that's looking pretty nice. So I'm going to save that, come back out. And because of the way that Silhouette Paint works, when we've got it back in After Effects, it's a really, really fast render. There's actually no more processing going on, really. All it's doing is just compositing our paint on top of our original clip. So it's nice and fast. Fantastic. So let's take a look at another shot now, which needs maybe a slightly different approach to it. We're just going to be removing our necklace here. And we'll do the same as before. I'm just going to duplicate my layer and delete the original Silhouette Paint we had on it. Okay, and let's add a new one. Bring this into the Silhouette Paint interface. Remove necklace 01. Save this in the right folder. I've got a Silhouette Paint folder that I put everything into. 8-bit is fine. And create project. Play that as bounce. Okay, so the issue we have here is that halfway through the shot we have a huge lighting change. This means if we were just to do a traditional sort of still frame patch technique, we'd end up having to do lots of color correction over the top of it anyway. The other thing that we need to be aware of is as we come in through here, we have a lens flare that moves throughout our shot. So we have to be very aware of what that lens flare is doing as well. Okay, so let's come in and zoom in onto our necklace. And I'm going to start at a tricky frame, so I really know what I'm going to be dealing with. That means we can see the lens flare going in this direction, and we can see the sort of extent of where the lens flare is going to. And we're going to start again with our trusty drag tool here. Because if we look at the differences in the color and detail with 8 and 9, you can see they're all pretty uniform apart from the necklace we're trying to remove. Now, when I'm dragging, I'm going to be dragging in the direction of those lens flares, so that if any of my strokes start to get caught by that light, that we don't get a result that's very easy to spot from a mile away. I'm also going to take the opacity down a little bit and just do a couple of extra drags over the top, just to sort of match that in a little bit better. It's looking all right. So we'll zoom back in again using the plus key. I will take my opacity up again. And I think I'm pretty good to just be able to drag across all of this side of the necklace without having too many issues. Drag in one direction, maybe drag a little bit back, and then over here to fix up that neckline. Now the necklace that goes along here is almost invisible in the color and only really visible in the detail. So this means that I'm probably going to be in a better position to just go into the detail and then clone that out just in the detail here. So just clone that nice and gently out there. And it might even be the same over here. So I'm going to come in, see if I can clone that out there. It gives me a bit of a splotch just in the detail, so we know that that's not going to be the right way of handling things. But drag seems to be working wonders again on this one. Now there are going to be areas where I'm not going to be able to use drag. And that's actually going to be this line along here, because if we have a look there, this is where we're going to be getting the lens flare over. So I'm going to be cloning this one out. And I want to choose my clone in a very specific way. If we take a look, zoom out a little bit there, you can see that when the flare comes out, it actually has two stripes that are, fairly similar to each other. So when I'm cloning, I want to be cloning from one of these flare spikes to the other one. Let's see what happens if I just do that at 100%. See, that starts to be a little bit visible, a lot visible. So if I bring my softness up, bring the opacity down a little bit, I can start to soften that out without getting that big line. And once we're in that kind of position, it might even be a good idea to come back in with my drag, maybe bring the opacity back up again, and just see what I can get along with the drag there. Now, I would be very shocked if this was perfect the first time out, especially when we've got such a large amount of lighting changes going between the different shots. So let's run the auto paint on this. Now, I've already got the motion track done with the necklace track here. Did it in the same way as we did previously. And I'm just going to name my groups. Necklace remove 1. Necklace remove, what would that be? Left, wouldn't it? There we go. So let's get all of these done. Be sure to match move across all frames, and let's play that forwards. And let's play that through, see what we've got. And as a first pass, it's not too bad. And I'm going to do a second pass now and just clean up bits where we could be doing better. So I'm going to find the frame where we are basically giving the game away, the worst, which is going to be around about frame 34. And let's see what we can do. We're probably equally wrong in both these different views, which is good news because it means we just have to come in and paint on the normal layer. So I'll come into the clone tool, keeping my source and destination very close to each other, and take the opacity down quite low to about 24, and choose my source to output. So we're going to be painting on top of the pixels we've already painted, or we're going to be cloning from the pixels we've already painted, I should say. We should be able to very quickly just get rid of those last little bits, the bits that were giving the game away, basically. Now, the thing about removes is that consistency is more important than perfection, because our eyes are programmed to look for small inconsistencies all the time, because who knows what that little flutter could be. Is it going to be a bad paint job, or is it going to be a tiger jumping out of a bush? So long as things are moving in a consistent manner, we can actually get away with a lot. So now I've done the clone, I'm going to come back in with my drag tool and just take the opacity down and just drag that back in, so we get something that's nice and consistent across the area there. Cool. Okay, and so that's great. I can just come in here, rename this group to remove touch up, and I can run the auto paint again. Now it's important to note here that the touch up group is on a different frame than where we did the initial painting. We did the initial painting on 36. We've done the touch up on frame 34. But that doesn't make a difference when we're doing auto paint, because so long as our motion track is right, our movement is going to be consistent throughout the whole thing. Cool, and let's play that back, see how that's looking now. I'm pretty happy with that. It's very difficult to see where we've done the remove from. So let's save that out, come back into After Effects, and here's our final shot. So we've seen several different approaches now to how we tackle removes in a shot. If we're dealing with something that has consistent lighting throughout the whole piece, we can just paint up a single frame and then motion track that in as a regular patch. If on the other hand we're dealing with something that has some other lighting changes to it, it's best to use Silhouette Paint's Auto Paint feature to get a nice consistent result. And if we're doing that, then we need to be aware of the types of tools that we're using. So if colours are changing within a shot, we can't be using the colour. And if lighting is changing within a shot, as it is here, we have to be aware of where that lighting change is coming from, so that when we do clones and drags, we're using that same sort of shape of lighting to hide the fact that we've made any changes at all. So as you work more and closer with Silhouette Paint, you'll find that there's a lot more different techniques that you can start to use, but hopefully this is going to give you a nice idea of where to start. Thanks very much for joining me. My name is Ben Brownlee from Boris Effects. And if you want to learn more about Silhouette Paint, then come and join me on some of the other tutorials that I've created to go into other features and workflows. But thanks a lot for now, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching. If we've missed a topic you'd like to see, or you want to see Silhouette Paint tutorials for a different host, then let us know in the comments below. In-depth explanations and tutorials to get you started can be found in the Silhouette manual. And remember, you can download a free trial of Silhouette Paint from borisfx.com.